All right. Well, welcome everyone. I hope you're having
No.
see here. I think AI has still already taken over the program. All right. Let's try that again. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here. Hopefully your Davos is already off to a great start, and we hope to add to that with a really good discussion around solving for humanity through AI. My name is John Schultz. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We are one of the supporters or sponsors of the AI House, and really excited to see how much energy and buzz there's already been here early on with the AI House and the AI topic generally. We've got a tremendous panel here to talk about solving for humanity with AI, and it's a bit of an eclectic mix, but I think we'll hopefully make for an interesting discussion. And then we do want to make sure we leave plenty of time for Q&A and engage with you all. To my right is Her Royal Highness, Princess Beatrice, who is also the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for Affinity. Next to the princess is Manoj Leelanivas, who is Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Juniper Networks, based out of Silicon Valley in the US. Next to Manoj is Firth-Butterfield, who, in addition to being the CEO of Good Tech Advisory, is an author and an ethicist, someone who is very well known in this space. And then last but not least is my colleague, Evan Sparks, out of Hewlett Packard Enterprise, who is the general manager of our AI solutions and supercomputing group. So I think a great mix of folks to talk about the issue we've got in front of us today. Evan, if I can, I want to start with you, and let's just talk about where do we think we are in the life cycle of AI? Its adoption. What are you seeing in the marketplace? Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of buzz. How much of it is actually getting deployed? What are you seeing in that regard, and how worried should we be right now based on what you're seeing?
Well, as somebody who's been focused on the technology for close to 20 years and always thinking it was about just around the corner, I would say over the last year we've really hit an inflection point. So in the market, what we saw last year in AI infrastructure build was about $50 billion of fresh spend just in the second half of last year alone. That's big GPU clusters for training and tuning these big models for things like large language models, both from the hyperscalers down to enterprises beginning to adopt the technology. But it feels like we're still very much in the first inning of the technology. I mean, the public imagination has awoken to what could possibly be done, and the use cases are, as we've all seen, just proliferating. But now's a really good time for us to start to ask, how are these going to have an impact on humanity and society writ large? Because, in my opinion, they're going to seep into every industry, every mode of human existence that we've seen.
Manoj, maybe picking up on that theme, AI's been around for quite a while, but for a good chunk of its history, it feels like it's been kind of behind the screen. Mm-hmm. Big nation states, some technology companies, but it hasn't necessarily translated itself into the day-to-day. As Evan was saying, that seems to be the inflection point we're at now. Give me a sense, what are you seeing day to day in terms of use cases, true adoption, and this kind of democratizing or proliferation of AI?
So 1950s when AI was coined, John McCarthy, for those of you who don't know. But I think there's been three significant moments in the last decade. Number one was, I'll just make it as simple as possible, convolution neural networks, don't worry about that. Identifying objects in pictures. So that happened about 10 years ago. Then 5 years ago or so, the transformer model happened in Google. That is basically, you have a sequence of photos, and you can actually figure out what's coming next. You can actually make a video out of it. So that was a big step. You can just see, like, from just flat images to things getting better and better. And the biggest inflection, like Evan said, happened just recently. ChatGPT kind of made it real. Gen AI, where now, based on a data set, you can actually predict what's next. So it's the first time, to put it in Yuval Harari's, the author of *Sapiens*, for those of you who read *Sapiens*, it's the first time in the human history, where something most human, which is language, is being taken over by machines. Right? Once upon a time, Industrial Revolution happened. It was automation of the brawn, the muscle. Right? Then, the computer revolution happened. It is automation of the brain, more the logical parts of the brain. The Go champion was defeated by Google DeepMind, and that was the point when you realized humans are behind on the logic. But most recently, language, which is the most human of everything, language, conversation, music. Now, this is a pivotal moment where almost everything can be done by machines, and which is why I think responsible AI becomes a big part going forward. But the applications are a lot. Code to cache, things which can be automated. Anything which is mundane, which you do today, is going to be automated and will be AI-driven. And this actually is wonderful because you can actually free up time for the good work, good and creative work. Even in my experience at Juniper Networks, right, networks are now self-healing. You can actually, the day zero part of the network, day one part of the network, day two part of the network, they all can be automated and AI-driven. Imagine 90% of your trouble tickets vanish before they happen. So that we are already there. I drive a Tesla all the time, and most recently from my home to office, it's fully self-driving, and I've gotten comfortable with it. So the world, in terms of use cases, is really there.
It's interesting. I was at a dinner last night, and there was a discussion around this, and I thought one of the interesting ways to think about it is we're in the fifth industrial revolution. The first four were really about the mechanical, industrial type aspects. This is the first one that's about the brain. And it's really about augmentation of how we think, and in some ways, maybe even sort of the replacement of that. So, Kay, somebody who's practiced in this space, especially around the idea of ethics and so forth, it feels like we're at a huge inflection point. So how are you thinking about it? What are you worried about? What can you say to all of us to make us feel a little better? Where are you on this?
Okay, yes. So, yes, it is an inflection point. And I think one of the things that I'm pleased about is that we're finally talking about it, because I was the world's first chief AI ethics officer back in 2014. That's a decade ago now. So it's good that we're all able to talk about it. I was hoping you were going to ask me, and so I'm going to be a politician and answer the question I want to. I was hoping you were going to ask me about what am I seeing? Yeah. Because working with large companies, I think we're seeing quite a bit of use of AI, but not through every vertical. Smaller companies, much less because of the data problem. But, when I think about solving for humanity, I also think about the fact that small and medium-sized enterprises are really not there yet. Depends where you live as well. Global North, there are 100 million users of ChatGPT, and some of those people are in the Global South. But there are also 3 billion people who are not connected to the internet. And as I said yesterday in my opening, there are 50 million people, and I know this is something that's close to your heart, who are enslaved in our world. So it's a very patchy deployment of AI.
Princess, how about yourself? What are you seeing in this space? You hear Kay talk about this dichotomy between folks who aren't even connected to the internet and other folks who are trying to think about how they're going to take AI to the next level. I mean, the disparity seems to be the greatest that certainly maybe we've seen in our lifetimes.
I couldn't agree more, Kay, with what you said. And I sort of stumbled into AI in my career, working with Affinity, and what I'm still learning so much is how much we don't know. And we spend a lot of our time even sort of branding things AI, and what does that really mean, and how do we actually communicate around that? So how do we actually take a fantastic tool that could be used to make all the changes that we really need to see, but we're actually not doing a very good job of communicating and having an inclusive mindset of what we really need to be doing. We are seeing a huge digital divide, especially when it comes to women and girls. And then what that means really is that we are building the networks, but really are they fit for purpose to make sure that our education systems are there to invest in what we really need to be doing. So when I think about the future of humanity and how AI could be really helpful to that, there's probably been more spent on investment in AI than there has been on the human intelligence. And that, to me, feels like a really interesting shift to see how we actually need to be sort of, as the consumer or sort of the general customer, really needs to be asking better questions of actually where the data is coming from, how do we protect ourselves, and how do we make sure that we're taking more, especially young people, along the ride with us, to not be scared of it by actually sort of going one level deeper and looking at the actual underlying understanding of it.
You know, this issue of inclusiveness, this issue of AI equality, right? We're just on the cusp of it. You know, I think as you sit in a place like Davos and you talk about the future of work and the like, you know, one of the things that's starting to come, to the fore is people realizing that until recently, the way to get ahead in the world, whether you're a country or an individual, was hard work, low-paying labor, right? If you're the cheapest labor in the world, jobs will flow to where you are. That's going away. You know, in some ways, it's being described as, you know, the ladder's being pulled up, and the haves are going to get even more powerful, and the have-nots are going to be stuck in place. So, Evan, coming back to you, you're dealing in large systems, right? You're dealing in systems where hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars are being put into these systems. How in the world do we make that inclusive? How do we make it equality? How do we even start to think about that when the barriers to entry are so high?
Well, one of the things that actually, I agree, huge problem. But I think one of the things that actually gets me excited about this space right now is the tremendous efforts that are going on in the open source. And the open source models today that are, 7 billion, 15 billion parameters, they may be 6 months or 8 months behind what the commercial state of the art is, but guess what? They are twice as good as the best models a year ago were. And that open source community is really pushing the envelope forward and making the technology really accessible. We have some very large customers. For example, the U.S. Department of Energy, out of Argonne National Labs, they've invested in an effort called the Trillion Parameter Consortium, where they're taking U.S. tax dollars and the systems that we build for these customers, and they're carving off time to build large language models built around scientific data for the betterment of all humanity. That's going to be a public good that everybody, not just U.S. citizens, but people around the world can use, where we can match sort of capital to meet the demands of the larger audience. And I think that kind of open ecosystem is going to be really critical to level the playing field.
It sounds a little bit like, the early days of the internet, in which once we were able to push the internet out and make it more ubiquitous and democratize it, it changed so many more lives. It sounds like we're maybe in the early stages of that. Is that how you kind of look at it? And are you cautiously optimistic, or do you see it, going in a different direction?
I think so, in part because so much of the foundations of modern AI have been laid by open access research, open source, and so on. And so the education gap to get somebody from, I don't know what a neural network is, to I'm training something very close to state of the art, that can be closed in months. And that, as long as that continues, as long as the controllers of the capital and the intellectual property here don't completely close off, I think we have a shot at keeping this technology open to humanity.
Kay, how are you? I mean, what are you seeing in this space around this idea of inclusiveness or AI equality, whether it's at the government level, whether it's at the corporate level? What are you seeing in this area that either gives you hope or says, hey, warning sign, we're not going in the direction we should be going?
Yeah, I think that the place that gives me most hope is in healthcare, actually. And we're seeing some great advances in healthcare. But, on the flip side, it's all about data. AI is all about data. And if you look at heart attacks, for example, the majority of the data is about white men who are over 55 living in America around heart attacks. And so we have to do better in getting the relevant data available. So, that goes back to the 3 billion who are not connected to the internet, and also goes back to the point about women and persons of color, because we don't have good data banks for them. So
Are you seeing efforts to start generating, not just generating that data, but capture that data and make sure it gets into models? Or we're still just in the issue spotting stage and you're not seeing any real solutions at the moment?
I think we're more in the issue spotting stage at the moment, and it's potentially a huge problem because it continues. Most of the data on the internet, of course, has been created by white men because you've had the pen for all these years. And so it goes to, what society do we want with AI if it's not pulling data from the whole of us?
No. Manoj, where are you on this issue? What are you seeing on this digital inclusiveness, equality around AI, the data set, bias, et cetera?
I think Evan is 100% right, and so is Kay. I think Meta with the Llama models is kind of democratizing a little bit on this whole thing. Otherwise, the hyperscalers would have been ruling the roost, and the rest of the world are second-class citizens. Now, with the open source model, I think things are getting more democratized in terms of at least the training elements. But still, there is a divide because for Microsoft to do OpenAI to do ChatGPT-4, $50 billion of investment have gone in. Who can do that investment? There's only a few companies in the world who can do that. So there is a digital divide still. Not even all companies in Silicon Valley can do that. Now sovereign states are stepping in and saying that, okay, we're going to invest in AI clusters, we're going to invest government money, taxpayers' money to do that. And I think that's a step in the right direction in a way, because that kind of balances out the haves and have-nots from a democratizing point of view. But on inclusiveness, I think I'm an AI optimist. I think this is one of those, pivotal moments. It's more than the internet revolution, more than the smartphone revolution. This would democratize things in a big way because I already have first-hand experience, right? I'm on the board of a company called Automation Anywhere. When the Ukraine war was happening, refugees were coming, same thing in Myanmar. You could use AI to speed up the processing of refugees, and actually this makes a huge difference in their life, right? A child could be put away for child trafficking versus child being connected to the father. That was the difference. 400% improvement in times to kind of detect whether somebody is connected to somebody else. Those kind of things, are going to change the world, in my opinion, right? And reskilling and retooling. That's one area we need to put a lot of effort. Okay, I completely agree with you. The data sets are not fully there, but at the same time, the data analysts are also not fully there. Like the number of AI skilled people is so little, but we can actually train and retool and reskill people. Again, one of the companies which did this, like it's a social, it's a social company which does, it's called Robo Co-op, which took the refugee women, females, and trained them on AI so they could actually do some work in Japan remotely. They didn't even have to go there. So these are kind of green shoots, I would say, and I'm very, very optimistic about the future from that perspective.
I love the fact that you're an AI optimist, and I would say I'm both an AI optimist and an AI pessimist. And if I think back to the internet, I think about all of the pluses that came out of the internet. But I think in the early days of the internet, no one would have predicted it become the #1 pornography distribution mechanism in the world, and maybe one of the greatest exploitive tools we've ever known, right? And I look at AI and I think that same likelihood is going to exist here. Maybe not on pornography, or maybe it will be pornography, I don't, but you'll get the positive and you'll get the negative. And so, for instance, as you think about being an AI optimist or an AI pessimist, where do you come down on this, and what are you thinking about? What do you see as the force for good, or what are you worried about, more specifically as to maybe the unintended consequences that come from something like this?
So I am an AI optimist, because I am really, because I'm seeing the way that digital tools are really helping so many. Even we are embracing the digital divide, we are seeing the fact that these are giving so many opportunities that wouldn't necessarily be there. But what I am quite interested in the short-term adoption of AI is the fact that, I especially look at this as I work a lot with large enterprises, is that how can a large enterprise start to become AI ready? And actually there's so much pressure on sort of some of these large enterprises that they've got to have all of their data in the right place, and how can they adopt, and actually what is the sort of sell-through model for a lot of these business adoption. So actually I'm sort of slightly concerned, maybe in a short term, that we've got so much excitement, but actually have we put the right steps in place so that the right things can be adopted at the right time? For example, I don't know if any of you have tried to sell to somebody in procurement. It takes a long time, and they don't know a lot about AI. Right? And so how can we make sure that they're involved in the conversation so we can have the right conversations around data bias and their data being in the right place, so that we can actually see some of these fantastic companies come to, get the right business models, get paid the way that they need to, so we can actually have a lasting effect on some of the good things that we really can apply intelligence to and really solve some of those problems. Again, it comes back to that data readiness conversation. I'm sort of a long-term optimist. If we can get our ducks in a row in terms of getting the right data at the right time from the right sources and train people on those sources, and go back to that point around critical thinking, and sort of bring back that sort of opportunity that we have as human beings to be critical about what we're saying, when we're saying, and how we're deploying it.
So Evan, if we're sitting here 5 years from now, we're having a conversation around how's the last 5 years gone? And has AI turned out to have advanced humanity in a way that we would all hope? Or do we look back and say, things have gone kind of horribly wrong? Like, in your mind, what's the thing that we ought to be focused on to say, 5 years from now, we'll be having a positive conversation? Is there something you've got in mind where you say, I think this is critical to this being successful and being viewed as a force for good?
Yeah, I like your analogy with kind of the internet and sort of the unforeseen consequences, and I really think about that. I had the privilege of working very closely with the World Economic Forum's AI Governance Alliance, and we put out a report to coincide with this meeting as well. And one of the two key things that came out of the discussions going into that report, number one, design with the downsides in mind and the risks in mind. So take a holistic approach to the design of your AI systems end to end, and think about what the potential risks are. Number two was, I think, really a consensus that we should be really focused on outcomes, not algorithms. And we should think about, okay, so 5 years from now, what are the outcomes that came out of the deployment of these AI systems? And if we think about something being exploitive, was that the AI's fault, or the person who decided to use it for those exploited purposes? And do we have to hold that person really accountable for those outcomes? And I think that's where I am hopeful that our regulatory frameworks around this will come, because there will absolutely be new risks that emerge.
One quick follow-up for you on that. Outcomes over algorithms. I couldn't agree more, but there are going to be folks who say we need transparency in those algorithms and the like. Do you have a view or stance on the level of transparency needed around algorithms to ensure that we feel like there's fairness and there's goodness?
When I was in grad school, we were told we could never trust a neural network because it was a black box and you had no idea how it was handling the inputs. There's been a lot of really good research work over the last 10 years or so to begin to explain what some of these algorithms are doing. But I think that it requires a higher level of abstraction to ask yourself, okay, what is this algorithm doing? It is building a probabilistic map to meet the objective function that I'm training it on, maybe predict the next word in a sequence of words based on a data set that I harvest from the internet. If you look at that as this is what the algorithm is trying to do, and it is maybe not doing that perfectly, but it's doing that with some probabilistic likelihood, you could potentially think about ways that you might elicit transparency from that level of abstraction instead of deep down in the weeds of the algorithm. And so you have to. What I just gave was a super nerdy technical description of how you might regulate these things, but
I got it 100. I was on top of that.
At some level of the stack, I think you asked the right question.
Yeah.
If I may just add a point
Manoj,
to
go
what
ahead.
Evan said, I think there is some research happening on the machine consciousness too, where there is AI policing of AI decisions. I think, and then when you have different polices and then compare and contrast things with that, it can further give transparency, or at least right or wrong, maybe a little bit more judgmental about that.
Yeah. So, Kay, same question to you. We're sitting here 5 years from now. We're looking back. What do you think the big defining piece is that helps push us in the right direction? Is it data transparency? Mm-hmm. Is it more data inclusion? How are you thinking about what's going to drive us in the right direction over the next 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I too am an AI optimist. Often people think I'm not because I point out the problems, but I am, and I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't. And I think that the sort of sweet combination that we need to be looking for now is understanding that data is a product and that we should be AI is a product, and we should be thinking about the people that we're actually going to sell it to, and that will actually help us to think about the right data that needs to be behind it. So we could help to solve bias if we have more diverse teams when we're building our product, and that's something that businesses have known for a long time. So I think it's about product, it's about data. It's about procurement and training. It's about the C-suite. So it's wonderful to see you here. Really allowing that concept of responsible AI to percolate throughout the company. And finally, I think it's about these conversations. Where would we as humans like to be with AI in 2050? Let's not wake up in 2050 and find we don't like where we got.
Manoj, same question for you, and then I'll come to the Princess. 5 years looking back, what do you see as the biggest thing that will keep us going in the right direction?
I think, to me, we are talking about a planet Earth in some sort of trouble right now. So sustainability is big in people's hearts and minds. AI and sustainability have had a lot of goodness together already. If you look at, whether it's the smart cars, with AI-driven cars, self-driving cars, they really help reduce the carbon footprint for a long period of time. They're going to reduce the footprint over a period of time, and even in the business I'm in, like for instance, the big networks, they consume a lot of power. Now you can actually have smart algorithms and do traffic engineering to figure out, okay, turn off parts of the network. When it's not in peak utilization, why spend all this, wattages unnecessarily? Right, so I think AI has really started helping there. Reducing truck rolls, a simple thing like, a Wi-Fi equipment has gone down, and truck roll is increasing the carbon footprint. Right now with self-driving networks, you're reducing the footprint. So there's a lot of those things that is already happening, and I'm very, I love the fact that all of you are AI optimistic. Beatrice, I love the fact that a person of your standing is saying that, because I think there's more and more things to be done, and I think, so I like sustainability and AI, planet Earth and AI together, and also democratization. I think more and more. It doesn't look like it's all there, but it's coming.
Princess, 5 years looking back, what do you think is going to be the?
Okay, I have one sort of sensible one and then one humorous one.
All right.
So I'll start with the humorous one. I would really like the idea of resetting the algorithms every 5 years or something, so that I don't have to deal with the same Netflix shows all the time. I'd actually like to kind of go
clear
back,
your cache, so to
clear
speak.
the want to be at sort of zero to be able to build it up again every 10 years. But then again, I'm really sort of excited to see how we can apply the intelligence to some of the most important issues. And I'm really conscious of the fact that I'm using this word applied intelligence rather than artificial, because I really do think it takes a bit of a step change. We very quickly use the term AI sort of quite colloquially, and I think if we take a moment to sort of apply the intelligence thoughtfully and carefully, I think we really can in the next 5 years see the changes, as long as we can kind of do that sort of in collaboration with each other and learn how to sort of be more open with each other.
I want to open up for questions, but before I do, one quick final round here. Interestingly enough, right, we haven't really talked much about the role of government. And there has always been an interesting relationship between government and technology. So as you think about where we are today, you see government as a big player in making sure this thing turns out for the better, and 5 years from now we look back as success? Or do you think somebody else is going to be the most important factor, the most important agent in making sure this is a force for good? Is that, number one, the government's obligation, or do you see it sitting with somebody else, Evan?
I think in certain cases, it may fall to the government to develop some of these solutions, or maybe most natural. So to give you an example, we're working with Government of India on a potential project that's going to involve training language models for every dialect that is legally spoken within the country. We want a way to easily translate between 20 or 30 dialects within that nation to give citizens equal access to public documentation. Who has more data in all of those dialects than the Government of India, and who has more responsibility to offer that as a public service? I think that's a government duty in that case. And it may not be served well by a commercial entity. So there are going to be, I think, places where the government can step in for the benefit of the citizens. There are also places where I worry that the government will overstep, and whether it's too much monitoring of private citizens and our discourse, or others where there's really tempting uses of this technology. And I think hopefully as citizens we'll be able to have a voice in that as well.
Kay, as you think about who's going to be the biggest influencer in making sure this goes the right way? Do you have
Again, I think it's where you live in the world.
In the world.
So in China they have already regulated around AI in many ways, and yet that they regulate business but not themselves. In the US, we don't have regulations, so therefore probably the biggest influencers should be the companies who are building AI or using AI, and that's why I say procurement and having a proper responsible framework in your company is so absolutely vital, because you're not getting any help from the government.
Manoj, who do you think, who's the biggest influence over the next 5 years?
Kay is 100% right. Like, China doesn't regulate themselves, but they regulate everybody else. And US is a little bit free for all right now. But I love the stance EU is taking in between. Actually, one of those things which is really good, the AI Act, which actually at least cordoned off a few things. Don't touch this. For instance, emotional recognition of students' phases. I mean, that can go in a very different tangent altogether. So they said no more of that. Education sector, there's only few things you can do and few things you cannot do. So I think government has a huge role, and I love the way EU has kind of stepped in and said, okay, we're going to do this, but not go here. Typically, I used to think EU kind of overreaches, but this one I think they've taken a good stance. I think the US stance is not right, and of course I'm not going to comment about China.
Yeah. Beatrice, final word, and who you think has the biggest influence on
Okay,
making
slightly
this go
difficult
right?
for me to talk about government.
Yep.
But I think that, look, I have been lucky enough to see some fantastic successes with the public-private partnership model. I think bringing in also civil society as well, I think is phenomenal. I've seen some fantastic examples where some of the greatest sort of long-standing organizations like the ITU and the GSMA have really stepped into the space to make sure that there is fantastic opportunities where we can really see very clear and concrete examples which can inform policymakers, but also can inform individuals as well. So I really do see the role of the individual, the role of the consumer, and the role of that end goal being really critical in this journey as well, because we have a responsibility to take control of this. This is not somebody else coming up with the ideas for us. Like, if you want to use ChatGPT 3.5, it's a fantastic tool, it's great, but just make sure you as the end consumer are in power, in control of what you're doing, where you're taking your data, what are you using it for, and at the end of the day, the buck does stop with you.
Yeah. So let's open up for questions. Yeah, sir. Can we,
Here's the mic.
there we go. We got a, oh, look at that. Perfect. Nice
Thank you.
throw.
Does that work?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I've been doing AI for more than 40 years. I started my PhD at MIT in AI a while back. So to me, the technology has followed exactly, again, we can't tell exactly when, it's followed the path. My concern is not technology, my concern is society. Because to me, the big challenges, and you asked exactly the right questions, don't look to AI. We're doing fine. We've been doing good on technology, it'll get better. Here are the problems I'm worrying about. I'm worried about employment. In the US last century, agricultural sector went from 40% to 2%, right? What's gonna happen to white collar jobs in 5 years, right? I'm worried about democracy, right? Right now on my phone, I can run models that I can say, analyze this issue and give me the unbiased two sides and tell me which candidate has what, and I can become a better voter. Or demagogues can use it to manipulate voters. Yep. That's a society question, not a technology question. And education, every kid can now have an aristocratic grade tutor on their phone. Or, it can go the other way. It can be homework Armageddon and destroy the educational system. So to me, I think this is just right. But as an AI person, we're doing fine. I'm worried about society. So I'm just curious, what should we be doing to see those more positive outcomes? So let's start with employment. Yeah. What do we do? What do you see as what's going to be the white-collar sector 5 years from now in terms of jobs? The people who, it wasn't a great job, but who made a living picking cotton, now like one guy can, one woman can take care of a vast farm with robotic tractors and all that. Where do you see employment, as an example, going in the next few years?
Whether it's employment or the like. Evan, let's start, and we'll just quickly go down the line. What's your...
I've got my mic on full time. So at least for me, when I look at the U.S. agriculture sector and the transition we had there, I also look at the overall quality of living that happened due to other technological progress that happened. I have no reason to believe that this is going to be any different. Okay, a lot of mundane stuff that we do in white-collar jobs is going to be automated away. I'm hopeful that opens up us to use our human ingenuity for the next great challenge. If I knew exactly what that next great challenge was going to be, maybe I'd be in a different profession. But I am hopeful that we give people the tools. It lets us really focus on the things that make us human, and maybe we get a lot more artists out of this, or we get a lot more people who are writing the next great book, which I think we need a lot of too.
Yeah, I think it's a great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's the great debate of, is this an existential change, or is this just another dislocation in which you have to manage across the divide, but you have the view that people are going to get across the divide, and maybe the divide ends up with more folks in arts and humanities or more folks doing data work or the like. But maybe, Kay, quick answer from you, and then we'll go to the next question and grab the others. Go
sure.
ahead.
So, all the studies seem to say that there will be more jobs created by AI than the ones that we lose. The question is, what is that gap? Yep. And how do we manage that gap for society so that we don't leave people impoverished because they've lost their jobs? And I think that's the question of the next 5 years, probably not of the next 10 years, because we'll gradually get there.
Yep. Next question. Yeah, over here. Yeah, can you, we'll throw you the box. Yeah, hopefully no one gets injured in the process. Yeah. Distinctly low tech.
So all the issues you touched on today have been long pondered by the social sciences. The problem is there's a missing lingua franca between the tech field and social sciences, and there's a lack of incentive to hire people from the social sciences and give them power within organizations. So how do we incentivize companies to actually hire these people to help them think through these questions?
Manoj, you want to tackle that?
Yeah. So definitely, I think companies in Silicon Valley are recognizing that the domain expertise, social sciences as well as the domain is actually equally important as the algorithm generators. So I think people are increasingly getting there. And all the wonderful creations of AI have come from people who brought these two together. So I think people are recognizing that. It may not have filtered around the entire world, but I think people are recognizing that. Because the combination of 1 + 1 = 3. If you just do fantastic models without any reality on the domain, no good. If you know all the domain stuff but don't know how to apply the scientific part of it, it's no good either because it cannot scale to the large humanity we have. So I think it's increasingly getting there.
It's great. I think we had a question here.
Yes, I would like to address a question to Princess
Yeah.
Beatrice. You mentioned that we need more human intelligence to deal or to take responsibility for AI. What specific skills do you mean by that? I'm a civil servant. I work for the government. I'm very interested in how we can empower our people to have this human intelligence. So what skills is it?
So it actually is what I mean by that. It's a little bit more basic. Sometimes I find in this conversation around AI, we're very quick to use buzzwords. We're very quick to not question something and say, oh, can you just go down a level deeper on that? What do you mean by that? And I think, we are in that sort of wonderful divide at the moment where if you don't necessarily speak the lingo, and every sector has lingo, but AI and notoriously has it to another level, and that's what I've witnessed and what I found. So actually just applying another level of, let's say, sort of checking your own naivety or sort of your own abilities to just question a little bit more, just go one level deeper. So I've seen examples of that, of like, I've sat, trying to pitch an AI solution to lots of CEOs, and actually just by creating sometimes a bit of a forum where they can ask another question, or making it just a little bit easier to bring people along the journey with you, I find that we'd get a little bit further. Is my hope anyway.
I think the other.
I am entirely hopeful of that.
Yeah, I think even analogizing back to the internet, right? There needs to be some regulation. Corporations need to the extent they're participating, they need to moderate themselves. But I think one of the things that's also come out in the internet is just personal accountability. What are you using the internet for? What are you posting there? What are you searching there, et cetera, et cetera? I think in the early days of AI, it's easy almost to take refuge in not taking personal accountability for your own use of it. And I do think that personal accountability piece can't be substituted for. Over here.
Thank you for the interesting session. Ophir Zan, I'm leading the growth organization at AI21 Labs, basically providing LLM and task-specific models for the enterprise. So my question will be on the enterprise. Being involved in about 150 sales cycle to the enterprise, we saw the lack of maturity, inconsistency with evaluation metrics, mass experimentation, budgets. There was no real regulation. We didn't need to go through procurement and so forth. And I think that 2024, at least our focus, is to look at production workloads, and actually measure that as a success as an implementation within the enterprise. And it's definitely for the regulated industries. These are the industries that we sell to. My question is to you is, what kind of metrics would you put in place to actually see that Gen AI is being deployed within the enterprise and not just being used by hundreds of people that are testing all the models, open source, Anthropic, OpenAI, AI21, and so forth?
Yeah. So maybe just to the panel, I mean, if you were thinking about not metrics, but even thinking more specifically, is there some way to think about creating a metric that measures whether this is doing good or not? Versus just taking cost out or doing other types of, more standard things?
So I guess the first thing I'd say is your experience does not differ from ours that much, in that we deal with organizations across the spectrum of immature to mature with their adoption of these technologies. And the ones that are immature don't know what to measure, don't know if it's any good, don't know even how to get started in many cases. And in many cases, it's our job to bring them along. I think just as with any application, you start to, as you move these things into production, as you move them into critical pieces of your business process, you start to be able to measure, how is this impacting my ability to do business in a way that I wasn't able to do before, or materially improving my business. And that can be both top line in terms of generating more revenue or decreasing costs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You can go into specific areas and get those metrics very well even today. Like for instance, if HPE's business, if somebody is using HPE's equipment somewhere, you can have metrics where say X amount of reduction in trouble tickets. Say you had 1,000 tickets before using HPE stuff. Now, 90% of that has been eliminated. So that's a great metric, for instance. For developers, the amount of code you generate, there's a lot of prior art, there's a lot of libraries, the Copilot can help you a lot in terms of writing, not just code faster, but actually better code. So that's another metric you can actually measure. Testing, again, in the IT business world, a lot of things can be measured in terms of, customer found defects, how quickly you can do, customer use cases. So there are metrics in each of these areas. I'm talking more of the IT world, not for the broader spectrum. And code to cache, for instance, how quickly you can speed up, business process, robotic process automation, how quickly you can go from your Teams or Zoom call to actually approving something in your SAP. All of that stuff can be, simple metrics.
Pure tangible metrics.
Tangible metrics.
I would also, there's a huge sort of trend at the moment to look at a lot of these solutions as driving out cost, but actually they're very expensive to implement. So actually, how do we change the metrics to be more focused on the revenue numbers of revenue being produced as well? And then also, who is responsible for your budget line as well? Like, who are you selling to? Is it an IT budget? Is it CDO's budget? That also depends, like, which part of the company that you want to like sell to as well, and gives you a little bit more transparency as how to make sure that a lot of the times you're expecting the left hand to talk to the right hand, the business side to talk to the data side, and then the IT guys are sitting in the middle trying to implement. So trying to have a joined up conversation with all three at the same time, and then coming back to this revenue metric as well is helpful.
So maybe some final thoughts on the issue of solving for humanity with AI, et cetera. So, Kay, why don't we start with you? Sort of final thoughts for the group on this issue.
Well, I think one of the things to your question about metrics is, if you're going to deploy it in a particular place, then you're going to be able to test for metrics much better. So, for example, in sustainability, there's been a lot of work done around returned goods. So it's extremely expensive for the world, in sustainability terms and in economic terms, for goods to be coming back. And we know that we can use AI there to better look at the process, the development line, and take out the defaulty goods. So I think it depends where you're actually, what sector you're selling into for your goods. In terms of a closing point, I did actually just want to pick up, and I'm not being sycophantic here, but Kirk, who works for HPE, is a scientist and has been doing an enormous amount of work on responsible AI with your general counsel. That seems to me to be a perfect combination of bringing two sides and then the rest of the business together to push forward responsible AI within the business.
Manoj, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think there was a question earlier on, AI from an engineering perspective. I think we really know what to do, but the social aspects and what does it do for jobs and everything is a big concern, I think, from the gentleman over there. Yep. I'm an optimist here, too, because I think if you go back again to the Industrial Revolution era, when it was horses and horse carriages, yes, people did lose jobs, but people found new jobs. And I think it's happened in every stage. Every time, whenever there's a change, we are humans, have that hesitation, natural hesitation. Okay, jumping into something new, what happens to the existing stuff? But I always am a believer of the human spirit. We have solved problems. Yes, we are nasty animals. We've done horrible things too. But we always come up and do something better. I think so. I do believe in that human spirit. So that.
Thanks, Manoj. Princess, final thoughts.
I believe in collaboration. I'm an optimist, but we need to collaborate to make sure that every part of this moment, whether it's thinking about jobs, thinking about how our young people are adopting it, we need to collaborate and have more conversations so that everyone can just take a little bit of fear out of the room and actually have some adult and robust conversations and not be afraid to say, I don't know, and really kind of be okay with the fact that together we can find the answers.
Yeah. Evan, final word from you?
I think that in order to really have this technology have a broad impact on humanity, we have to close that access gap. I would love to be in a position where we can give every child a smartphone with a copy of Wikipedia and a local copy of a large language model on it, so that they can tutor themselves and bring the entirety of the world's knowledge into everyone's hands. And I know there are a lot of efforts out there to do that. I'd love to see us invest more in broadening access to this, I think, really powerful technology.
Well, thanks to the panelists. Thanks all of you for participating, for the great questions. Hope you have a great rest of your Davos. Thank you very much.
John.